Hi there, Linda Behrens here. I just want to share with you today a few thoughts about each of the 16 personality types. In one of our group sessions, we were talking about the use of multiple models, and one of our colleagues said, well, it's really a 3D approach. And I said, I'm going to steal that. Is that okay? And he said, yeah. So really, this is a different approach to personality. And what we're looking at here is a three-dimensional approach to looking at each of the 16 personality types. And by having this three-dimensional approach, we can get much richer information about each pattern. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're about, what we're after, and talk a little bit about what this approach means. What do those 3D approaches say? We have this journey. It's all about a journey to getting clear on some things about your personality. And in order to do that, I just want to get another framework that we use often, which is the whole idea that we come into the world with the structures around us, cultural memes, different systems that we're in, and the whole tenor of the time, which often shows up in talking about generations and new generations and how they're different. So all of these things are there as we come into the world, and we come into the world with what I believe is a core self. I believe it's genetic. The template is genetic. We can never prove that completely, but it does seem like this core self, who we are at the core, there is something that's constant about that lasts throughout a lifetime. And we come into this world with all of these things going on, and situations happen, and they sort of push on us, and they say, oh, do this, be this way, this be this way. And that's the self we call, it's our current behavior, and that's the self that we call the contextual self. So the contextual self is how we behave in a particular situation. It's where we can be most adaptive. Now, if you do these behaviors over and over again, they become somewhat habitual. And in response to the pressures from the outside world, we grow and develop in response to that, and as well as the pressures from internally, because as you know, if you've watched babies, they grow and they grow rather rapidly, and they develop and they learn to talk and they learn to walk and they learn to do all kinds of things. So our core self, our personalities, that core self of who we are, does grow and develop. So there's a push internally and a push externally. And what results of that is we adapt to the external and we grow in response to the internal push. And that is what we call our developed self. Now, I like to say that our developed self is pretty much who you are. I mean, it's how you behave. It doesn't have to be the way it is. We can make some changes in that. Doesn't have to, kind of be stuck in a particular pattern of behavior. So, we adapt and we grow, and we have all of these kinds of things that we respond to, but there is a constant core that many times we've forgotten about, that we've adapted so much that we haven't been able to be true to that constant core. So that leads to somewhat of a yearning. So when we're looking at personality type, we're not looking at just current behavior. And a lot of times instruments pick that up, or I don't know, something you read, something you look about and you say, oh, that's me. But really, what is this? How can we understand what is at the constant core? And we do that by using multiple models, different lenses. And so we know that at the core self, we have different looks, what you might call this 3D approach. Different lenses give us different information. So then all of these other things happen, like traumas, culture, family dynamics, acquired skills, physiology, all kinds of things happen that kind of cloud over what that constant core is. So if we can take a 3D look at each of the 16 personality types and get some light on, shed some light on what these different aspects of the core self might be, we can have a much fuller picture of who we are. And each lens gives us different information. So when I'm working with individuals, especially, I like to help them discover their essential motivator patterns. What is the why of their behavior? What really deeply motivates them? And what talents do they have that help them get those core psychological needs met? And that gives us a view on each of the 16 personality types. But it's not complete in and of itself. It's very useful because it's 4 and people can remember 4, but it's helpful to have other views. So we have another view, which we call interaction styles. This is how we behave, the how of our behavior. It's what it looks like. It's a very visible lens. There are 4 interaction style patterns, and they're pretty easy to see. So often when I'm working with organizations, I work with this lens so that people can really grasp these individual differences quickly and have a tool to use right away. So those are the 2 popular lenses we've been using for a number of years. And back in the early 2000s, the beginning of the 21st century, actually, here, we had the emergence in some of our research of another lens, which now makes it truly 3D. And this has sort of been sitting dormant for a while. We've been working with it, but it's what we call intentional drivers. So these are the drivers that tell us what we're intending when we're working on a problem or when we're trying to problem solve. So we have, the books aren't written yet, but we have enough evidence from the work we've been doing that there are 4 intentional driver patterns. So if we look at these different lenses, we have a much better picture of what each of the 16 personality types look like. Now, there is ultimately, if we look at it, a holistic theme for each of the 16 types. And we can shed light with these different lenses. So that's that 3D approach. We can sort of unpack the dynamics of the 16 personality types and look at the processes that sort of maintain those patterns. So if we want to take a look at understanding the 16 personality types, it's really helpful to have these different lenses. And then so we can understand the cognitive dynamics, we can understand it's a pattern of these processes. So one thing I want us to keep in mind as we're looking at each of the 16 types is that we are living systems. And living systems, in order to understand living systems, we have to look at the pattern. What are the patterns of those systems? Patterns are interrelated, like a theme, the theme and a pattern that sort of rules the system. It involves a lot of things. Now we're tempted to look at the parts of the system, which we might call processes. And those processes, like the cognitive processes, those are the activities that help maintain the pattern. And these patterns are really ways that we can describe life itself. So we have the patterns, we have the processes, and each of the lenses in this 3D approach have a pattern that we can get to the theme, and they also have processes that help maintain the pattern. So we can learn, good information looking at just one of them, but let's just look at all 3 of them to be helpful. Now, a couple of other things about living systems. There is a structure, there's an embodiment of these patterns. And there's a little brain research that talks about that. There has been over the years research on body types. It's a little bit hard to describe the concrete structure of these personality patterns, but there are some that we could relate to, and we could look at So far, I don't have much to say about it. The other aspect of living systems is that we're looking at the meaning. What is the meaning? What is the purpose of this system? And so these are 4 essential qualities for each of the for living systems, and that we look at each of the lenses or the models in terms of these essential qualities, focusing primarily on the patterns and the processes. So the patterns stay the same over time. Processes vary. All of life's things vary over time. So just like the trees, a conifer and a broadleaf tree, they're trees. What makes them a tree? Well, they have the essential qualities of a trunk and a branching system, and they have some means of exchanging oxygen and CO2. For the broadleaf tree, it's a flat leaf. For, as the name says, it could be tiny, it could be big. And for the conifer, the branching system is somewhat different. It just comes directly out of the trunk, and it has these little needles instead of these broad leaves. But nonetheless, so that they're still, the pattern of treeness stays the same, but the processes are different. And so we want to look at each of these personality patterns and try to understand just what is the essence of these patterns, and how can we come to understand them in a way that is very helpful. So let's kind of just keep in mind that we're going to take a look at each of the 16 personality types and a little bit about the kind of information each of the lenses can give us. So I do hope you join us and keep checking in to see what you can gather about each of the personality types as we reveal them. So thank you for joining us.